This class utilizes an analytical approach called problem-based research. So we'll have three questions in this podcast. The first of these is, what is problem-based research? Problem-based research starts out with a problem, some issue that someone somewhere has identified as requiring action. In this class, we'll regard this someone or some institution as the client, because we will act as if they have contracted your team to develop research and development proposals to address the problem. So the first step in understanding problem-based research is recognizing that every issue has multiple stakeholders, people with interests in the issue, each of whom sees the situation differently through the lens of its own interests. The client is one of these stakeholders. The problem is defined by the particular interests that the client has in the issue. The sorts of problems that require action in ITS are complex problems, and they are complex for four key reasons. First, the problems are rarely well defined. Often people talk about the Kashmir problem, but narrowing it down to something that is actionable requires a good deal of work on the part of the policy analysis team. Second, these are complex problems because they are difficult to solve. Most of the problems that you will pick as topics are problems that other people have attempted to solve in the past and have failed, and you guys will be working on problems that have proven themselves difficult to solve for many other professionals and students alike. Third, the problems involve relationships between multiple variables, such that changes to any one of which may affect one or more others. So these are systems in which you're going to recommend interventions, and if your client takes your advice and makes those interventions, there are all kinds of consequences, some of which you will foresee in your policy analysis, but some of which you won't. Finally, number 4, different stakeholders will have different opinions about the problem. They will have different opinions about what the problem actually is, different opinions about its causes, and different opinions about how to solve it. Our second question is, why do problem-based research? And once again, I'll give you 4 answers to this. First, problem-based research is more likely to generate results that are usable and more likely to generate results that are actually used. The reason that problem-based research is more likely to generate these kinds of results is because the existence of a clear problem means that there are people who are in need of the solutions. So it's not just answering a theoretical question, but a practical one. Second, the findings are more likely to be articulated in ways that make sense to the potential users, whom in this class we've identified as our clients. A second reason for doing problem-oriented research is that it is more likely to link micro levels and macro levels of analysis than are theoretically driven approaches, because real-life problems involve all kinds of complex variables operating at multiple levels. Third, problem-oriented research makes sense to people outside the social science fields, and it's therefore often much easier for people doing problem-driven research to get funding and to get access to the research sites that they need to do the research. Finally, problem-based research is a powerful way of advancing social sciences, even the theoretical social sciences, because it identifies gaps in our theoretical knowledge, and it identifies gaps in our ability to apply our knowledge. From the discovery of these gaps, we can then produce questions that can be, for which answers can be sought through other kinds of research approaches, including theory-driven research. Okay, and finally, the question that is probably the most urgent for students in this class: how do we do problem-based research? To begin with, complex problems of the sort that you guys have identified as your topic and formed groups around get broken down into a number of smaller interrelated problems, problems that are more solvable than the more general topic. The initial problem that you started with, the topic, becomes the problem situation, or in French, the problématique, which is sometimes called in English a problematic. Sometimes you hear social scientists saying, or non-social scientists saying something is problematic. The actual use of the term problematic, though, is as a general topical problem, women's rights in Egypt, which then can generate smaller questions that can be answered as part of a research project. When you go from the problematic to a research process, you have to identify a series of specific questions about the problem situation that you can then that will then generate answerable questions, researchable questions. That is, simply saying that we want to look at the problem of women's rights in Egypt is not a researchable question, but it is a problem situation that can generate a series of questions. One way to visualize this is to see the problem situation as generating a set of subproblems. So if the problem is women's rights in Egypt, then the subproblems become how is sexual harassment in Egypt dealt with? Another one could be what about the problem of women's education? Another could be women's dress. Another could be how are women treated under the law, which could include constitutional issues. And then each of these subproblems yields a number of potential questions. So if your question is about, sexual harassment, then that can lead to a series of questions about what kind of legal recourse do women who are sexually harassed have? What kinds of civil society resources do women have, and so forth. So the good news is that the more precise the questions that you derive from the problem or the subproblem, the quicker your research process is going to go once you get started. The bad news is that identification and formulation of the right questions is usually the hardest part of the whole process. One year we had a group that chose a question about a group of people in a part of the Middle East about which I only had very general knowledge. And I passed a question which I thought was researchable, and so did they. And it was not until they were well into their second chapter and we had a consultation with an expert in the field by Skype from the U.S. Army War College, and she took their question, and it turned out to be, from her perspective, a subproblem, and she began to generate a whole series of much more targetable, researchable, and answerable problems. And so the students found themselves, having to literally go forward with a tighter question, and then after their presentations, go back and rewrite the entire project with this narrower question. So they ended up with a good project in the end, but they had to do a lot of work because their initial question had not been formulated as well as it should have been. So how are we going to proceed in this class? I have a specific worksheet to walk you through the process. The worksheet is here on the website. You're going to download it. You're going to fill it out independently and then bring it to class, share it with your group, and work on creating a collective problem statement, which will be the basis of your project moving forward. What you're going to do is you're going to begin by identifying a topic or a problem situation, and this is the situation that you identified as a topic when we formulated your groups. You're then going to identify as many stakeholders as you can imagine, and you want to be as specific as you can. So, maybe the Egyptian state, but what specific institutions in the state, which ministries, which government agencies. When you talk about the Egyptian state, you're talking about the judiciary, the federal government, the legislative branch. Break it down into as many specific shareholders as you possibly can. Then you're going to select one of these shareholders as your client. Then you are going to refine the problem as a specific research question from the perspective of the client. Okay, that is as we saw in the diagram at the beginning, the client's perspective and the client's needs shape how you're going to formulate the problem that you're going to answer. And then finally, you are going to begin by imagining ways in which the client's perspective will affect your research. As you go forward, you'll refine that, but you want to at least be thinking about it right from the start, which is why I have this section in the worksheet. And that's it. So download the worksheet and fire up the search engine and get started in filling it out and be ready to bring it to class and talk about it next class time.